Protein. Potatoes, a little bit. What's the next big thing? Yeah.
Domesticated animals
Yeah.
and crops.
They have the domestication of animals and crops. And the thing about that domestication is once they had it, even if other places had animals similar or had other domesticated animals, they had a leg up. They're already advanced. And one group that has a surplus of, and that's 3 surplus of food, right? So 3 surplus of food. C. If one group has the luck of geography, they could domesticate earlier. They have the surplus of food. They could start getting specialization and start having soldiers. And by the way, that's not the way of money. That's where money, gold, would become valuable because of soldiers. All this started happening. Boom, boom, boom. When all that started happening, the big thing was that now they're big. They have the advantage of having now the more people, more technology, they have a size advantage, where everybody else has a disadvantage. And in competition, the big will usually win. Big and whatever it might be. There's an economics term for that, and economies of scale. And I'll talk about this more later, but scale matters. And so it's not that the people who had this were smarter, but they had the competitive advantage. And humans are incredibly ruthless for the most part. And so they just take it. Any other questions in from the worksheet? Any ones we could not find? Yes?
What were the 3 things for number 2? Or
Yeah.
were those kind of up to us?
Kind of up to you. What did you put down?
I said type of plants, native animals, and diseases.
And what?
Diseases?
Yeah.
Endurance and steel.
Yeah, it is, really. Plants, also a little bit animal, that kind of thing, and then also, diseases. Anybody else put another one? I kind of left that open. There's a lot of different examples. Anyone have another one? Yeah.
I guess out of curiosity, so if, say, like the Native Americans had learned to sail before the Europeans, and they had gone over to Europe, they would still have the native diseases advantage, because the Europeans wouldn't be immune to the diseases in America.
No, it'd be the same thing, no. I mean, they had the sail and technology. They did have sailboats.
Yeah.
And they did have those things. They just didn't have quite the technology because Europeans had a head start.
Yeah.
And I should add, even though malaria and yellow fever came over for the African slave trade to the New World, when the French tried to reconquer Haiti in about 1803, 1804, they had a slave rebellion, and the French sent troops over. What happened to the French troops?
Oh, it's sick.
They all died of yellow fever and malaria. So it's kind of like that in reverse. Ironically, that was a disease that came here from Africa.
But all the rebels, so to speak, were immune to that kind of.
Not more immune.
More immune.
Yeah, they would still get really sick. Yes?
For number 2, minerals found underground, would that work?
Yes, minerals are a key one because once you have, think about minerals as in like metals. Because once you have the ability to have time to start working on things, that's why when they mentioned that, you watch a video about plaster, which is just limestone, water, and clay, which is the basis of cement. You have to have time to know how to superheat that limestone to 1,000 degrees and then mix that in. Making cement is what a huge thing. But if you're spending 99% of your time trying to find food, and then, let's rephrase that. 20% of your time trying to find food, and then the rest of the time resting because finding food is so hard, you don't have time to do that. So minerals, that would come to copper, tin, eventually iron's a biggie. And there's a reason why gold's valuable, fits into there. Any other questions from that? It's a good video. I mean, it covers a lot of the prehistory, covers a lot of stuff. They do a good job, and allows us to move right into the Sumerians and the bald-headed onion eaters. Anything else? Well, onions. Gotta have your hair match that.
Ogres.
I was thinking about shaving my head. What?
Ogres are lemons. See?
Wow. You're blowing my mind. What domesticated animal came from the Americas?
Camels.
Hmm?
Horse.
Well, horses weren't domesticated here.
Oh, domesticated.
They were just eaten here. But they crossed over the land bridge into Asia and ironically came back. What?
Camels.
Llamas.
Llamas.
And
They're related. What else? Alpacas, a little bit. But they're not really, you know, we just mentioned 6. There's one they didn't put on there, what's called Bavarian ducks. This kind of domesticated duck, but they're not quite the same. Now most of them are feral. That's it. Oh, he didn't add one thing that was domesticated, which that's understandable because he think about domesticated as something big that goes in herds. That was a big thing, so they can be controlled. Guinea pigs were domesticated too. He's eating guinea pig. Okay, tomorrow for lunch.
Yeah.
I had guinea pig once, and you know what it tastes like?
Guinea pig.
Yeah, just like guinea pig. Yeah. Tastes exactly like the way you would think guinea pig would taste. Who's that gator? Alligator? Horse? Duck? A duck? Frog legs? Okay.
I think so.
Snail?
I have a very
Rabbit?
cultured palate.
Okay, tomorrow for lunch. Oh! So Aaron, Kate brought me a gift. Almost forgot. It's the big-headed version of Washington crossing the Delaware before the Battle of Trenton in 1776.
That's pretty good.
Thank you.
You
I
like
bought
it?
at Target.
Yeah.
All right,
According to Anna Bowden, their heads come off, but I haven't tested that.
I'll pop them off in front of people. Okay. Any other questions for this? We got it? I hope you liked the video. Put your name on it. I'm trying to decide. I have a pretty good video on Egypt called Engineering an Empire. On Egypt. I'm trying to decide if I want to show that, but I mean, here's the thing about it is we can pick and choose, certain things, get the highlights. Okay, so let's collect both things. First off, give me the gun, germs, and steel.
I'll get it to you tomorrow.
Because you have kids tomorrow. Now the early civilizations
Any
map.
chance I can get this to
Give
you
it to me,
tomorrow?
Mom.
Thank you.
Just remind me. Okay, I put this on Teams. Did anyone else get this map? Okay, I'll take yours. Okay. Would you mind holding it so I
Nope.
can mark it? Okay. How's it going with the mask, everybody? Dries out your throat, doesn't it? That's what I hate,
Not really. I feel like I'm yelling.
because I'm talking.
Oh, I don't know.
I'm laughing because that's exactly the way I feel all the time, I'll be honest. And I talk loud anyways. What up with the maps? So I'm going to give you the ancient Near East map. And by the way, I put down Nile. It's the Nile Delta. Or I put down Delta. I'm thinking Nile Delta. And Thebes is in Egypt. There are 2 Thebes. There's another Thebes in Greece, but we're not quite to Greece yet. I love maps. You're just going to have to deal with it. Do you like maps?
Yeah, I don't mind.
The thing about it is that I think it reinforces, but it just makes things easier to know if you know where places are. It really helps. I'm a firm believer of that. I'm not saying you have to have the absolute memory, recall every place. Because my guess is you probably won't, you could. I hope we'll get to the point where if I give you a map a little bit later on, you could do a significant amount without looking at another map. If you get there, there's little things where then it just becomes easier to put things together. You have a spatial relationship. So if I'm talking about the Frankish Empire in eastern France, you start, okay, I know where the Rhine is, I know where the Atlantic, the North Sea. You know, you put things together above the Alps. So I got my little allergy, and breathing through the mask makes it worse. Wish I knew what caused the allergy. Nobody knows. All right. So we're there. I'm going to give you a little bit of time to work on the map at the end of the class, but let's go take your notes out. And I will do notes in class. I do this a lot. I don't have a lot of a PowerPoint here. I started doing a PowerPoint, and then I got busy doing something else. I like PowerPoint to show pictures, but I'll also use the board. By the way, you notice my new mic?
That's a big one.
Big. Supposedly, it will keep the echo from the floor down. We'll see. I'm sure the people online are going, yeah, right. So, I got a longer cord. I gotta write some stuff on the board. I want to make sure it can show up. Will it show up? Probably not. But everyone smile. See, you're on camera. Very small. I like, actually, if we had everyone here without DLI, we'd have about 16. I know, it seems weird. That'd be a nice size for this kind of class.
Yeah.
Right now, we just play it by ear.
Make do. And then I'll just sneak in. Just for fifth period.
And the same thing with special topics, the class I teach next period. Because of scheduling issues and stuff, it went from 30 down to 15.
Oh.
And that's,
Sorry.
huh?
I'm sorry.
But I know there's all kinds of. Okay, we're done. How dare you laugh at the destruction of our studio? I wonder if anybody's watching that.
Oh, geez, this doesn't look good.
All right, so notes and write down Sumeria. And just a couple things. When I do notes, if I do PowerPoint with pictures, I'll just use bullet points, but I do the same thing on the board. I'll just write down 1 or 2 words, and then it's your job to add in the words, and then when we have a unit test. So our unit test will be after we get through the Egyptians and the Hittites and the Phoenicians. So in about a week and a half, it'll be those things that will be on the test. And for this class, I will give you a list a few days before the test. And the test in here will probably be either very basic, matching or multiple choice. And then for those of you who haven't had me before, something I call short IDs, just a couple short IDs. The test will be pretty basic. Sound good?
Are we doing that in person or on Teams?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't know. I really am trying to decide what would be better. Okay, I'm going on my phone to see what this looks like. I don't have a monitor. And nobody will respond to my. I've been emailing every day. They gave me a laptop so I can use as a monitor, so I can watch what I'm filming. You know what I mean? Which is really helpful. And
Do you want me to get mine up?
those got me, okay. I might have to, maybe
Is
tomorrow.
anyone else watching?
Yeah, that's one. But record, that's the great thing about YouTube, to be honest, you can watch it again. Maybe next tomorrow.
Okay.
Yeah. So the big thing is, just so I know what's on, I learned that last year in the spring when I was trying to do that, and I first started doing this, like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I have no idea what you see, and it drove me nuts. So, with that, we're talking about ancient Sumeria. And the thing about Sumeria is, and I will put a couple pictures up, but actually Sumer, and that's Sumeria. And we're talking about the area of Mesopotamia. In fact, let me put up a map. I got a couple things up there that I couldn't decide, and I was playing with it, and then I just kind of ran out of time. Yeah,
Was Mesopotamia a region or an empire?
it's a region.
Okay.
And I'll show you more pictures of this. This is actually a picture I took. This is from the Babylonian Gate. And this was stolen. I mean, Europeans went through and they stole everything. And this is in Berlin. And this is a massive wall. They took the wall with these bricks. And this goes on for about maybe 300 or 200 feet. This wall's of tiger or lions and different animals and gods. And this huge gate, and I'll show you more pictures of it. But the Germans took it. And it's in this museum called the Pergamon Museum. This massive museum in the middle of Berlin. And I have in-laws who live in Berlin, so I took this picture. But that is from Babylon. And see how colorful it is here? Can you imagine how colorful it was when it was brand new? And this thing, the side of the wall, it's about 15 feet high. The actual sub-gate they have in the museum, it is about 25 feet high. The main gate was 40 feet high, but they couldn't get in the museum. So think about if you're on the plains and you got nothing, you're living in a hut, and then you see this city like this with these massive gates and walls. What's your first thought?
Oh no.
These people are so powerful and great and glorious. And either I'm going to do whatever they say or I want to be part of it. When the Romans would conquer areas, and I'll mention this again, when they went into Gaul, which is now France, and they would build a massive theater. They would build a big arena that we always call Colosseum, but it was an arena. They would build all these incredible buildings and statues of great Roman leaders. Why? Look what we could do. Walls don't necessarily protect you. Walls are a way of saying, look at our power. You sure you want to mess with us? That's why we're going to build a moat. Right? So what do we bring in tomorrow? Shovels. And gators. Can you get gators?
Yeah.
Sure, that's easy.
Yeah.
So, that's the Fertile Crescent. And the Fertile Crescent is Mesopotamia, this area right here. This is Mesopotamia here. And you notice some of the early cities, and many of the cities that are on here, are right here. Ur, Babylon, Nineveh, Nebuchadnezzar, destroyer of Nineveh. We'll get to him. It's relatively dry, but it did rain, they have the soil, they have the grasslands. And yes, it's desert now, but they did a good job in the video of talking about how before human interaction, it was grasslands for miles. And then with human interaction and then overgrowing and irrigation, it turned much of it into a desert. So here's Mesopotamia, and I want to make sure I got this down. It's the area between the Tigris and the Euphrates. And there are two, if you see them on a map, they're wide rivers. Narrow rivers that are big, narrow big rivers are deep channels. Did I see narrow rivers that are big? What the heck did I mean by that? Narrow rivers on high ground are narrow and deep. Like the Yellowstone River, or Yellowstone River in central Montana, or the Missouri River. It's deep here, relative, because they move faster. But when they get to flatter ground, they begin to meander and they spread out. So they're relatively shallow. And that's what these were. In fact, when the Tigris and Euphrates have water for much of the summer, they're either virtually dry or you could walk across over a mile of river and never get your knees wet.
That's weird.
There's a river in Nebraska called the Platte River, and it's like that at the end of summer. Mile wide and a foot deep is the old joke. And it runs into the Missouri. I know about the Platte because my dad grew up on the Platte. Literally in the middle of the Platte River. But the Nile runs year-round. But this, relatively dry. But that means there's groundwater right there, and it floods. And so villages began to form around it. Now think about when it got drier. When it got drier, where did people have to go? They had no choice but to go down from the mountains, down from areas where they were to gather food to where there was water. And what did they find? And we'll get to this whole canals, and ditches. But what did they find right here? Mud and reeds. But what can you do with mud? Clay, bricks. Hard work, but you can do that. And every time it floods, what does it do to the soil around it? Drops nutrients into it. You just need water. And that's why they began to, working together, dig ditches. And by the way, if you dig ditches, aren't you getting mud too? So you dig a ditch, you have the mud, make bricks, you build your homes. They begin to build reservoirs. In fact, canals. Their whole society became based upon ditch digging. Which of course kind of makes sense, doesn't it? And if it's going to flood, don't you need to know when the flood's coming? Don't you need to kind of measure or preserve your water during the summer? So you have to keep track of things. You have to organize this. It all happened there because of the lack of water. And onions and wild jackasses. Donkeys used to run around. I guess they were mean.
Word?
All around here.
Yeah, they're still mean.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, donkeys are still mean. I was gonna say.
So just imagine how mean they were. But how do you domesticate them? Sheep would be domesticated here.
Give them trees.
Hmm?
You give them trees?
That's part of it. Food. Because like the first dogs were domesticated that way. After the Ice Age, they were hungry. Wolves began to come down to where humans were. And it was kind of like feed them or kill them. Or be killed. And they fed. But what's the other thing? So if they have babies and the mean ones, what do you do?
Take the babies.
Huh?
Take the babies.
What do you do with the mean ones?
Kill them.
Kill them.
Keep the nice ones.
Keep the nice ones. Next one. Kill the mean ones. Keep the nice ones. I know it's horrible, but that's the way it was. And what happens? Eventually, what's left?
Just nice ones.
Well, of course, when it comes to donkeys, they're just less really mean. So they mentioned the zebras, and the zebras just can't be domesticated. They're too flighty, and they're mean. And horses are big. Zebras are big. But there was a guy in Miles City where I grew up who rode a zebra around town.
Seriously?
Seriously. Never forget that. Of course, Miles City was a tough place. I don't think you guys could. Right? You're too soft. I was tough. Not he would ride a zebra. So every parade there would be a guy with a zebra. And I remember thinking that was so neat. But no one could get near him, and he would bite and nip at people, but he rode in parades. So, I just put a few things down. By the way, this map is old, or this map is new. Back when the Tigris and Euphrates ran to the sea, about 2,000 years ago, they started coming together, because it was a delta, and they started coming together now just one waterway to the sea. They used to both run to the sea. In fact, they used to both run to the sea, and the sea went to right here. It's all been filled in. But this was the area that like Iraq and Iran fought over in the 1980s. And so these are all the cities. In fact, that might be a good map for me to put up when I want to work on the map. And the cities of Sumer came, just a couple of things I put on the slide. I guess I put more than I thought. So, irrigation began about 5000 BC. I didn't put down BC, and I realized that I figured you guys would know it's not CE. We haven't quite made it yet. What's on your mask? Oh, okay. Last period, I had somebody with a mask with like a dog's mouth, and it drove me nuts. Said never wear that again, because I looked this half man, half dog looking at me.
They have a name.
Don't get any ideas.
Don't they? They have a name for those, don't they?
It didn't take long for real cities to begin to develop. And you can see this one with, you notice the moats, but these are irrigation ditches that also doubled for defense. And reservoir. And it didn't take long. This is only just, okay, long is relative. To us, long could be to the end of this period. But to the whole concept of time, we're talking in just a few hundred years. Yeah.
So, clarification. Irrigation began in Sumer in 5000.
Yeah, 5000 BC.
Is this one of the first places where irrigation was used?
No, actually, it probably began earlier. It almost certainly began in Jericho, a few places before. Probably in Egypt at this time or before. But we're tying it all together because of the kind of food that's the first world cities formed around irrigation. like at Tenochtitlan in Mexico, they were irrigating for 1,000 years. So, some of the big cities we didn't know, I didn't put a comma there, but Kish, Babylon, Nippur, Umma, Ukalain. In fact, Umma and Lagish, just these are some of the cities. Ur is always considered one of the first big ones, and that's why we have Ur there. And these are city-states. They are technically independent. No, they were not kingdoms yet. And the big thing about a city was, this is where the political and military concentration would be. Political and military. I'm trying to do this with my cloth mask because it's comfortable, but it's just not working. The paper mask is a little more flexible so it doesn't uncover my nose. Yet if you have a paper mask, you know how bad they stink. Yes?
So how big were like Ur and Kish and Babylon? Like were they like smaller than Helena? Like just for perspective.
The first ones were maybe just a few thousand, but eventually they would get up to maybe 50 or 60,000. And they would have organized streets, sewers. Don't make, maybe not pipes, but at least like something to get sewage out of there. Some usually using gravity running water, not quite an aqueduct or something like the Romans would develop, but when people had more time, people are really smart. And I was thinking about, you put us there today, and we just cry. And they are so much smarter and more talented. I wonder if this is working. It's not getting meaty. And people are probably happy. So, a couple other things. The city-state itself was not just the walled city, but then the farms outside. So the farms be outside the city. And the big thing about this is, as years went by, when those become valuable, if you're looking at, whoa, they got farms in cities. It's no coincidence that you're going to eventually have the walls will become more and more for defense, and then more and more you're going to need soldiers. And we'll talk about that tomorrow, what kind of soldiers they use. But in the center of the town will be the ziggurat. And that's one of the gods, and I love that. By the way, the first Sumerians shaved their head.
How?
We'll get to it, but I'm going to mention I was going to get to the Bronze Age and the Iron Age, but bronze. What's bronze, by the way?
It's one of the elements. I figured out that.
Say it again.
No, that's
No.
it's made out of copper and
I was thinking copper.
Copper and tin. Now, tin has a problem. If you ever work for tin, tin's really brittle, but if you melt it together with copper, you get bronze, which is much more firm. Not iron, but it takes a lower temperature than iron. Iron's better, but you need a much higher temperature. Better as in stronger. And so they had bronze, make bronze knives, shave their head.
Sounds painful.
Once you figure out how to make
It's
bronze,
like, have you ever had a knife sharp enough to where if you put it on your arm or something, you go like that'll cut your hair?
Oh yeah, definitely.
That's exactly what that was.
and they can make them that sharp. The thing about bronze, they would go dull faster. And then the Hittites would do iron. We'll get to them tomorrow. Love the Hittites, right? Who doesn't? And we can thank the Hittites for gold coins too. That's coming. And then from the Hittites, with that you combine iron and then the making of bronze. Well, you start mixing other things in iron, and what do you get out of that? Nickel, cadmium, tin.
steel.
Yeah, we're coming to steel. Steel is very difficult to make. You only make a little bit of it, but that maintains, it's strong, it's lighter, it maintains, like a blade, it maintains its sharpness. So, these step pyramids they would make. And by 2000 BC, these would be a couple hundred feet high. Nearly as big as the Great Pyramids in Egypt. They're being built about the same time. And unlike the pyramids there, those were tombs. These are religious centers. And the priest who would be, this is so weird to think about, but at first they were elected. But I think you can probably imagine what's going to happen. At first they're elected by free people. But, can you guess what happens pretty soon? As time goes by, the priests want to maintain their position and pass it on. So it's going to become more of a hereditary is the best way to put it. You know, like we're special, we're born here, it's ours. And so they would in many ways organize Sumerian society. They would organize it. These ziggurats in the middle of Sumer, that would be the granary where they would store wheat or barley or millet or rye, whatever the similar plants. What else would be there? They would organize
The metals.
the making of metals, the making of products from that. They would organize the building of walls. What would happen to these walls all the time?
Break down.
It's mud, even dried mud. So if it rains, they start to break down. So they're constantly having to rebuild it, even though they would begin to put them in a kiln and they would last longer. But still, that's also more expensive and time consuming. So everyone got that they would organize the entire city from there. They would have the storages of food. They would care for orphan children, or widows or widowers, or old people. Would all be done from there. They would organize it from there. But that also meant that more and more people are taking orders from people, from others. Now they're still first elected, but, and one more thing. So we have these people now keeping track of all this food and everything else in the ziggurat. What comes out of that? Oh, these are some of the gods. And the gods, I'll talk a little bit more about this tomorrow, but there's going to be a sun god. I didn't write this down, but do you know what polytheism is? Let me write it down. Yes.
We believe in many gods. Deities that control various aspects of life.
Yeah. And we'll talk about this tomorrow, but it was a big deal when they went from, they were still polytheistic, but when the Babylonians said, yeah, we're polytheistic, but one God's on top. Because once you get one God on top, eventually it gets closer and closer to one God. Which, by the way, is much more efficient for control. It seems like they've been mowing like all day. All morning they mowed, they were mowing this morning, and now they're back.
Grass grows fast, I guess.
I think they do like parts of it. I don't know. And one more thing I have to get. As they're writing, they developed a called the bell ring. Shoot, I wanted to get the cuneiform. By the way, I think this stuff is just so fascinating. We're kind of off how smart they were. The map. Let's have it done by okay, you can turn it in online on Monday or give it to me on Thursday. Sound good? Everyone good with that? All right. I'll see you tomorrow.
I have a question.
Sure.
So doesn't a lot of this sort of overlap? That's what I'm looking for with the Bible and the early Old Testament.
And we'll talk like Gilgamesh, the saga of Gilgamesh.
Yeah.
It's about a flood. So we got Noah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing how many of these stories, I don't know if it's through trade or is it a common thing about humans just have the same kind of like anxieties about the world around them, but it's amazing how much they overlap. Not completely, because you have people growing in different regions and
Yeah.
but like much of the Old Testament is tied to Sumerians, the Babylonians, which are
Yeah. Like,
and Egyptians. We got both sides.
yeah. Like at church, it's not much of a sermon if you don't hear about the Egyptians or the Babylonians or some other empire, the Romans.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Yeah, we've got the Roman, and that's one thing about being right in this middle. They're for Christianity and Judaism and Islam, because it got to start from that book too. They're all right there in the middle of that trade route, so they all want to come through there.
Exactly. Have a good day.
See you tomorrow.
My desk.
You can take it.
I can take it.
I would just move it because I thought I'd write on the board more.
Okay,
And I just, it doesn't really matter.
I'll just
You want to be further away from me, and I don't blame you. Make sense?
It's a lot of fish.
That's the first writing came about.
Is it this Western Civ?
Yeah.
Babylon.
They also use base 6 math. You know,
Oh.
oh. I took a history of math class in college, and it actually was a really cool class. But
Yes.
we had to do problems in base 6, and it just blew everyone's mind. And so it went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then it.
Yeah, then it starts.
But it was just required for the library, so I took it. I'm glad I did. It was fun. Are you cold?
No, she's excited.
Warm?
We're so excited to learn about Vietnam War.
Vietnam War? Were you able to watch Flash or online?
Yeah.
Did it work?
Yes.
Are you new here? I thought so. And you want to sit there? Are you happy? Okay, good. This class is a lot smaller. Actually, I told you about that. It went from 30 down to, there's a few people taking it distance learning, so we have about 15. This is actually really good in a way, because we're going to we do presentations. One of the problems I had last year when I had a class of 30, we do presentations, and they're fun, and it's great to hear other people talk about things, and also forces you to get in front of class. We'll talk about it. You're new here. But, and let me get you on your seat. But we will be able to get through presentations, a lot more of them, and we'll be able to get through probably a whole other unit. And so that's really good. And the vote was, did you hear what the vote was?
That's so excited.
Is that the order?
No. I'll wing it.
Wait, aren't we gonna do something on the 2020 election?
We'll do something on the 2020 election and the issues involved. And we'll do that like a week or 2 weeks before the election.
Idea.
Yes.
We should do like a mock run for president, and everyone who drops out.
Well, remember,
Oh.
if you're in this class second semester, we are going to make a cult. So that we're already going to start a cult. And so, Gracie, and did you just transfer into this class, or?
Yeah, no, I'm not new to Capital or anything. I just transferred into this class.
Okay. And so special topics, and we already did the vote. But for this one, we're going to start with Vietnam War on the 16th, do a little bit on music. And then we voted on other topics to do. And so we're going to do conspiracy theories in American history, the 2008 crash.
Wait, what is that? I don't think we.
Yeah, I don't think that was on the list, was it?
I saw like 9/11 was on there.
9/11's on there. We're going to do that one.
20s and the mafia.
20s gangsters we're going to do.
And like crime. I think like all of them had to do with crime.
I put down serial killers and crime, and I don't know if I want to do serial killers. That might change my mind. We did serial killers last year, and we had like 30 people do serial killers.
We should do a topic that's like
Just
more
focus on
colonial
the
times, because everything is like
Yeah, I kinda
20th
do that
century.
too. Well, those are the topics. We might have enough time for another topic. So I think I want to do that.
We could do crime.
I know it's always modern
Two
stuff.
different
Yeah.
things.
And so those are the ones we chose. The total vote. And where are we at here? Oh, I'm still recording in the other channel. All right, let me get to